So in your opinion, what does open source means to you? Is that a software you can use for free? Is it a software you can see the code? It is a software you can see and modify the code. It is a software you can call your own because it's no proprietary. It is a box you can open. It is a binary anarchy, woo! Or it is a methodology or a structure that changes the centralized power system to one based on collaboration. 20 seconds, go. Jacob, I think you have like the results, like how many people already answered. So let me know when everyone answered.
So far, I didn't get any responses. Have people?
I did. I submitted.
Already?
Oh.
I've already submitted.
Yeah, me too.
No. Oh.
Answers are going somewhere in the outer space. It's all good.
Okay.
It's all good.
Hopefully we'll get them.
Keep that in mind. So I start, I'll start sharing my presentation with you.
Okay, let me just relaunch that poll. Sorry, this is really confusing. I have relaunched it because I didn't get any responses. Maybe if have you all submitted the whole poll?
No problem. It was just because it's fun to have polls. Oh, good.
Okay, cool. All right, let me finish it, and I'll share the results and see if you can actually see it.
Oh, I can see it.
Oh yeah, now we see it.
And you see the results?
Yes.
Oh, cool. I can't see. Maybe it's because I got logged out because I'm. Yeah. Okay, it's fine. Right. So okay. So you can see the results. Only I can't. That's good.
Just want to make sure you all are seeing a huge pink screen.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.
So, open source. It's occasionally a tricky question, right? So, but and this is meant more to demystify a few stuff. But open source, it's not one thing. It can be seen through many lenses, and this is what I am to bring to you today. Are actually broader understanding about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this thing we call open source. And I will start with this phrase from a friend of mine, Denise, good artist, that says, revolution is a dialogue and commitment for and with others. And it is quite of a simple principle, right? Like, it's a dialogue, who doesn't dialogue? But I do believe that today it is very revolutionary indeed, because in this dystopian polarized world we live in today, but contains in this simple phrase the fundamentals for working collaboratively. And my goal here is to give you the tools to enable you to be able to think by yourselves about this matter, which I divided into a few topics. So I will talk a little bit about me, so you can get to know me a little bit better. And then I spend about 10-ish minutes talking about the history and all the concepts surrounding it. Some more 5-ish minutes about the user point of view, some more 10-ish about the maintainer perspective. And I will end up talking about my experience in the open source program office at Sauce Labs. And I will talk about what the heck is that, why do we exist, and some of the challenges we face on a daily basis. And for that, we have a special presence of my compies and my workmates and leads, that it's Christian and Diego. They are here somewhere. And they were the founder of this department at Sauce Labs, just in case you have some specific questions, which we will have 15 minutes at the end. Cool. So I will talk a little bit about me. I am a super enthusiastic, idealistic, small human being who, like all of us, haven't chosen the name I have, which is Paloma. I was born in Brazil land, and I was quite fortunate to get actually into my adult life in what I do consider our golden era, because we had international respect and funds for culture, including actually digital culture. And this is super important note, because this particular time and space shaped me. And the context was that, so you can have a picture. Imagine a flourishing digital culture with some access to affordable technology, because we still have 100% taxes rate over technology, so it's not actually super easy. But there was many government incentives and projects to open source and data transparency, and that was super interesting about this point of time. And indeed, I have some friends that actually work installing Linux and making all the government system open. We had the rise of hacker spaces all around the country, which didn't exist before. And in these places, we had like this creativity going on. There was like developers and creative people thinking about gambiarra culture, which I will quote. It is. Gambiarra is a specific Brazilian practice of makeshifts and the art of sorting the quirky and smart improvisation in order to repair what doesn't work, or to create what you need with what you have at your disposal. That is empowerment, understanding how the things work and not depending on the industry to bring what you need. And this is based on a very, I want to decolonize concept, where we were trying to find a voice. And I am formed as an artist, and in my artistic practice was also shaped by this particular historical moment. So for me, art has always been about this ways to question things around ethics, power, structures, the way things work, how do we perceive the world we live in, technologies, and the things around it. And to create and survive as an artist, I've done a lot of workshops, from animatronics to video mapping, always advocating for the use of open source software and hardware as a way to democratize access and knowledge. And I often helped translating documentation to Portuguese of software such as Pure Data, which is used for audiovisual content, or VPT for video mapping, reporting bugs, creating tutorial on how to create like a simple electronic circuits with Arduino, which is also open hardware, and organizing cool events, mixing live coding performance, heavy academic seminars, because it happens that people surrounded us, they're very academic, and of course workshops. And I help organize hackathons and makeathons, both in Brazil and in Mexico, and here in Berlin, I helped to organize PyLadies Berlin. I was also involved in a team competing to something called iGen, a biosynthetic competition for building genetic modified beings in like a building blocks thing with the engineering structure for sharing in an open archive, which is not common at all in biology. And I also am still involved in a São Paulo School of Medicine group called MedHacker, who thinks how to change medicine with collaboration and knowledge democratization. Well, this very weird curriculum is to tell you that open source can be applied in several fields. And my involvement with that was at this point, not as a technical person at all. So for me, it is about the concept and the philosophy that can shape our ethics and how we live based on collaboration and sharing. Cool. So let's go back to our pool and analyze all the possible answers that you have. When you research about open source history, you quite often, this date, 1983, when this, it's very cool to speak it in Spanish. In English, I never found the word. I would say Theo Richard Stallman launched this free software movement and pioneered the concept of copyleft. But free stands for freedom and not gratis. So this is why you will also hear Libre software. They take this Latin word, libre, which is free, and put it there so to make sure it's not saying, it's not about the money itself. And open source terminology actually came a little bit later in the 90s, embedded with a slightly different philosophy. While open source is a development philosophy based on the practical benefits of collaboration, free software is actually more a social and moral philosophy, which cause so many good, juicy gossips around it and very fervorous discussions. Yeah, so if you want to avoid the discussion, you can just say FOSS or free and open source software. And because the concept, it's really lovely, is actually expanded from software. And in the end of the 90s, people started wondering how this could be applied to design, to objects, creating movements such as open source hardware, open design, open food, open sex, open access, open science, open governance, and open heart. I'm not sure about the open heart, that I have doubts, but all the others, I'm pretty sure I can give you the links. They do exist, I'm not inventing. And it became a philosophy, a concept that changed the power structures and how this power structure is being applied to life. Basically, it is a methodology that changes the centralized power system to one based on collaboration and a mix. So, hey lady, did you say copy left license? What? I sure did, my friend. Licenses. This is like a brain exploding point, and I'll try to anthropophagically digest it for you. So to understand copyleft, first we need to understand copyright. Copyright is the legal right created by the law of a country, so it does depend on the country you're at, that grants the creator of an original work exclusive rights for its use and distribution. Software source code written by a person, it is considered an original work. Congrats, you are all artists, I must say. And there's something called the Berno Convention that protects the literary and artistic works. And it is an international agreement. So for not dependent on each country, they have this convention in Bern that started in 1886. And under this convention, an author do not need to register the copyright in order to own it. And the copyright exists upon a creation of the work. When Theo Installman created the GNU license, he defied this law and said, it is the right is mine, and I want to give the others the possibility and the legal right to copy, modify, and distribute this work as well. Open source license and copyleft was born. And the purpose of stating a license, so imagine, the Bern Convention was in 1886, and Theo Stallman did it in 1983. So it took about 100 years for someone to think, why can I not give the right to someone else? But the purpose of stating a license is to give people who want to use your work permission in advance to use your work. So a license, it is granting the rights for those producing the work to those who want to use it, regarding how it can be used and shared. It is a set of guidelines on the liabilities and responsibilities associated with using and distributing it. The license you choose is what permit the project material, the thing, to be considered as open source. And the copyright holder for this material is the one who decided which license to use. Software, it is considered a creative work. And fun fact, just a little deviation, in some countries it belongs to literature creation. I found that so nice. How beautiful is that? But although recent research, they said that it's not actually connected to our literature brain, nor to our mathematical brain. So let's not deviate. Very interesting research. Go back. So a software can have a proprietary or an open source license. An open source license generally is grouped in like a permissive or wiki or strong copyleft. That means how many rules or requirements you need to use this license, or the one who wants to use the thing. Permitting the use and the redistribution, including in proprietary applications. When in the case of a permissive weak, if it is a permissive or weak, the requirements are minimal, and it is often easier when you want to combine those licenses with either other copyleft or proprietary software. But this is super, super tricky and super complex and should always be supervised by an adult legal fellow. You need it, yeah. And there is also the other thing called a patent. The patent or mechanism for protecting intellectual property. It provides the right to exclude others from making, using, selling, altering, selling, doing things with the thing. And a project can have a patent grant or no patent grant. And a patent grant can either be explicit or implied. And there can be no patent grant associated with some license, which some may consider actually not to be open source at all. Complex subject. Highly recommend for the ones that are interested to take the Linux software course. At the end of this slide, which Jacob already have, we have several links, and one of the links is for this course. Bottom line, resume, for you not to need to remember all that. So there's the creator, the one who owns the thing that gives the birth to the thing. And this creator can patent or not this thing. And the creator can also give in advance superpowers for those who want to use, sell or not, mix and match or not this thing. Gotcha? Cool. So, this weird stuff is all to say that we needed to change things. We, humanity, we were just super tired of the old models of close your eyes, open your mouth, and let all the things get pushed into your computers, into your bodies, into your lives. It is a very empowering movement that by one hand gives you the right to choose, but by the other hand, it requires you to be more active user, owners of the knowledge. But remember, with power comes responsibilities, some money. And to understand those changes, I bring one approach, which is not perfect, but it is written by two good fellows called Jeremy Hymans and Henry Himes, and they wrote this book called The New Power. And the book is an invitation to debate about how this flow, this change, the shifting of power is affecting us. And this list you have here, they show a little bit of this difference. For example, they will call old when you have power that belongs to a few, this pyramid. Only a few can decide what to do. When you have the power held by many, they would call the new way of thinking. They also have a nice analogy with download and upload, which for me means I need a seat on this table, which is, if you think about all these social movements now, Black Lives Matter, gender equity, that means I want to sit on this table. I don't want other people to decide for me. Come on. So next question. Is new power always good in your opinion? Paul, please.
Wake up, Jacob.
Jacob, do we have a
Oh, you said Paul. I'm sorry. Yeah, we do. Let me do that.
So the question is the new power always a good thing?
Yeah. Please write in the chat if you voted, because I can't see it.
It is just yes or no. I will assume it's voted. Ooh. Cool.
Okay, I'm going to assume everyone's voted. Ending the poll. Oh, and now share results. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. So we have 20% that say yes. Let's see it. So I mentioned this book because the black box, meaning black box, what I say black box, what does it mean? That means like this opaque thing that I have no idea how it works, such as centralization, is not actually always a bad thing. For example, silly example, think about how much you love your MacBook because it is a black box system. You push the button, it works. Sometimes you just want to see your damn email like in 1 second. You don't want to have a super cool Linux program that you need and install fast every time you have to use it. It's okay. Life is too short. We need abstractions. But another example, it's pandemic times. How important it is to have a centralized, reliable source of information and centralized state that can actually take fast actions to protect everyone. And although I'm really against borders and military, I just cannot see military work with the centralized system. So let's see an example of how collaboration actually affects our lives. And I choose education because it is a very clear example of how centralized, exclusive, the genius, the academic, the only ones who have the money or the power influence to hold the knowledge can have through today's internet super decentralized learning system. There's this amazing interview in a podcast called Solvable, where Sal Khan, that is the founder of Khan Academy, the one who doesn't know, it's a non-for-profit online education platform with a mission to provide free world-class education for anyone, everywhere. So Khan Academy have these really impressive numbers. They have more than 1.5 billion video scenes, like a billion, and their material, their access for over 10 million students per month. How is that even possible? Well, they do rely on more than 14,000 volunteers, and often people who learn contribute back, and they do all sorts of things. They translate, because yeah, if you go to Mongolia, you want to be able to see it all. You need someone to translate it for all kinds of languages. Subtitling, advocating, using as actually the school system. Of course, it's not only volunteer-based. They need core developers and companies and states to guarantee the infrastructure. You cannot have access to this decentralized wonderful power if you do not have a computer nor internet. And one story that Sal tells in these interviews about Sultana, which is a fake name, and there's a New York Times history about it, which is, oh, there's the link there too. And the story is that suddenly Taliban come, and Sultana was super young, and she was forbidden to go to school, centralized power, education, no education for women. But her brother somehow gave her a computer with a, yeah, go play with the computer. And she decided that she would self-taught herself English because it's the main language on the internet today. And with that, and one day she just saw this magazine with this announcement for Khan Academy. She saw self-taught her thing. She self-taught her enough to have a scholarship in a United States university. But how could she get out of the Taliban regime to go study there? She did have the help of this New York Times journalist, and today she actually lives in the United States. She studies and she does contribute to major Nobel Prize winners in physics. Prepare yourself to cry when you hear this podcast. It's super beautiful. So next poll, please. So can we agree that access to information is a human right, a fundamental human right that should be unrestricted?
Okay. Once again, please write into the chat when you're done. All right. I'm gonna go with done.
Answer. Yes, we have a phenomenal 84% saying yes. But I have a question for you. What about when information is literally a weapon? So in 2012, there's this firm called Defense Distributed. And pay attention to the words that I found quite amusing. And they designed this gun called Liberator and released the plans on the internet. Within 2 hours, there were 100,000 downloads. Yeah, and well, at the time, 2012, Obama maybe, yeah, well, the plans were retracted by demand of the United States Department, which of course, after Trump, this is not the same, it is illegal, and this was just the first model. We must always think critically. Information and sharing is powerful, but with power comes responsibilities. And not always benefits all. And we should always be aware of, well, the damage this can cause. Yeah. So I will finish this part talking about the Shakespearean story about betrayal. A very, very sad story, the Makerbot Scandal. If you don't know, Makerbot was one of the first companies to produce consumer accessible 3D printers. It was founded in 2009, and it made possible for the RAP project, which was a super interesting project to develop a low-cost 3D printer to get to the consumers. RAP, it's super magic. It's truly do it yourself, and it is an open product. So open that you actually print almost all the components. So you print the components with it's super cool. But they needed to collaboration, right? You need everyone, and they needed Makerbot to make actually a product and to be sold. And Makerbot were the cool kids on the block at the time, and they could bring that to the market. The thing is that in 2013, they decided that they would patent this project, claiming that Makerbot was theirs. And the company was then sold to Stratasys for a millionaire value. And the community was like, what? This is a stealing. This is not remixing. Well, Makerbot failed. And yeah, that was a huge, huge failure. But that's a lesson to learn, right? Let's change the prism. And let's talk about the users, the contributor perspective of this. Next poll please, has everyone here ever consumed open source?
What do you really mean with consuming? Using or?
Yeah, either using or participating in a project somehow.
Can it happen that I used it and I don't know that I used it?
Yeah, that super can happen.
Well, every time you're on the internet, you're using open source in some shape or form, I think.
Okay, cool. I have my answer then.
But it's super interesting, right? Like, how do we know? It is, yeah, that is a very good point.
I mean, I would say if you've worked at Ecosia, you have consumed open source, inevitably. Right, I'm going to close the poll. Seems like
Cool. Well, 100% yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone, it cannot, the industry, it's absolutely relying on open source right now. So if you use any kind of computer or software, you are consuming it, open source somehow. And I have already said at the beginning, but there's a few ways on how I have told you a few ways I have already engaged at the beginning with open source, and the most common is actually using the software, right? But open source, it's an ecosystem. It's just not the software. It is super important in my software developer trajectory, and such as so many others, and we often refer to open source as projects as this ideal place to keep learning and keep alive our curiosity and passion for code. Whether you're a beginner or just want to sharpen your skills, those projects are really great for you to networking, build portfolio, gather some extra good points for your next job. So, but every project is different. And open source is a tribalistic culture made by technical and social norms. I'm not sure if I have this poll also actually, but I had the question, has everyone ever contributed to open source? Did I send that as a question for poll, Jacob?
Yes, there is a question like that.
Oh, cool. So
let me just launch it now.
Have you ever, now this question is, have you ever contributed, like you were conscious, you were contributing for an open source project? And the answer is...
Still keep the drum roll going. Okay, I think we might be done. Okay, let's do it.
Yes, good. Well, if you were one of my mentors in Ecosia Summer of Code, you surely already contributed, because that was an open source project, I consider. And every project, so think about, I like this metaphor. Open source is a tribal, a tribe. And every project has its own really different requirements and code base and contribution guidelines. Oh, it is often so convoluted to get started. And you may feel really overwhelmed and lost trying to solve, if you're trying to code any, right? Like you go there, you go to repository, like I want to contribute, and you see like, okay, I'll go for the good first issues, good first time issues. They are not easy. And to overcome this huge learning curve, you rely on the community, and sometimes you need to be taken literally by the hand, and hopefully you will stick around and do the same for the ones coming behind, and that will make the wheel turn. But let's analyze the costs of it. One extreme, oops, I skipped that one, sorry. One of the extreme examples are those this programs with intention to bring more diversity and more contributors, such as Oktoberfest, Outreachy, Rail Grove Summer of Code. I have participated actually in all of them, and let me share my personal experience, and let's together analyze numbers. Well, as I said before, each project has its own set of technical and social norms. How to communicate, how to get help, how to contribute, totally different. You rely a lot on the community to help. I relied a lot, and such people usually do, a lot on the community. We need them to help me understand every single step of the way, how to set up the project, how to solve the issue, how to push it back to the repository. And Outreachy is a really, really crazy competitive program. Within like a 3 up to 6 months, you are expected to fully engage in the communities you choose to contribute, and have at least 2 pull requests. That mean you will contribute enough to have what you did merged into the actual final product. In 2 or 3 months, 2 different projects. Well, I am super grateful, and I learned so much. I never passed into the program, but I learned so much. And I learned, but I never came back for neither of the projects I contribute with. not for the lack of care for the community, but because technology stacks are so differently and life just happens. And now let's look in something I have never thought before while I was just fighting with my own discombobulated demons during this time. First, some numbers. I've pushed two totally non-meaningful contributions, and I was quite active asking questions for 3 different projects, Opia, Creative Commons, and IFNI, during an average time of 6-month periods. 6 months of my life desperately fighting with the inner demons. That means that different communities read my doubts and get involved with and put more experienced developers to help me. Outreach and Railgirls receive an average of 400 crazy people in the same position that I was, and often with thousands of different questions and frustrations. If you think that, well, even really well-known projects, just like a Node.js, they have like 2 maintainers, 2 people that really understand the project and keep it going and filter all this issue and make sure all the contributions are valid and good. We have no regression in our code base. 2 people. And now get 2 maintainers per project, about 30 projects, 800 people, about 30 projects between these 2 people. So if there's 30 projects, let's say 6 maintainers, let's say each applicant, which was 800, ask at least 3 questions. That is 2,400 questions. And those maintainers, they are volunteers, so they have zero monies received for their time. How can that be sustainable? And let's take a look of the open source project anatomy. You have the code, but you also have the community and the communication and all the tools surrounding it. Code is actually the final product, which have to be managed during a kind of version control system. We often use Git, but we could have other version control systems. Our communities are the software users, the eventual contributors, and the maintainers. And communication needs a lot of love and channels with different public to answer questions, to coordinate work, to keep community space, to offer office hours, to help people onboard and solve issues, to educate users to use that thing. So you also need developer tools. Where is this all organized? In which repository? One, several? Does it need a server? How much it costs? This infrastructure do I need? How can the issues be discussed through an issue tracker? And how can this change happen? And this is why open source projects are projects. They're not just the source itself. And also why non-technical contributors are so important and often not recognized because it's less quantitative. You don't have pull requests for those kind of contributions, but it is so important. And by understanding the simple anatomy, you can maybe help manage things better. So let's talk about a little bit about how to maintain and manage the commons. It is super important to mention that I am not a maintainer. I had never had this huge project that I have to maintain. And my knowledge comes from my empathy, but also from a perspective from a book called Working in Public from Nadia Egber, amazing book. And this book, the author, she creates a historical panorama about different open source projects and management styles that may help this unsustainable situation. So open source is not this anamorphic mess. Project has specific needs, and this management may depend a lot on how it grows. Let's see how it happens. So you have this project or this life cycle, right? So the creator sometimes creates by his own space alone, and then it needs to be born and show the world. So you have the release. This release often happens in conferences or places that people get to know the voice. In this phase, you want people to get excited, to use it, to test it. And then you want people to get engaged. You set the project free to the world and to be changed through contribution. It's open source, right? People want to change it, modify it. That's the purpose. And this can reach the maximum growth, and then you have a stable project. It's there, it's manageable. But things can get super noisy if it grows too much. I mean, noisier to the point of several, that's a very common story of maintainers saying, I hate this project, I cannot deal with this anymore, it's too much. So many emails to answer, so many people asking me things. They just do not code anymore. And if you think about this management from the beginning, you can avoid a little bit of the suffering. But the question for this management is, how can you balance how much code is needed, how much attention is needed for these crazy people arriving who wants to contribute, and how much time it's needed to teach others to become actually active, meaningful contributors. And there are some engagement factors that may help you distinguish and change this management style. So how complex is the technical scope? And that's why you may hear a lot about open source best practices, because if you have, sometimes the project really needs a very complex scope, right? Yeah, it is a hard code, it needs to be reliable, you cannot be modular as most of the JavaScript based code. But JavaScript is different, it's more modular, it attracts another type of developer, but it's not always like this. But it's not just the complexity, it's how the communication is done, and it's really easy for people to support, and it is well documented, how much adoption, how much users do we have. And yeah, this may lead to which kind of project you have. And this author, Nadia, she categorized these 4 different types, depending on how centralized or how decentralized the management style is balanced between user, contribution, and how is the growth in high contribution or low, high user, the growth of users and contributors. Make sense? So I have some arrows here to show. So stadiums, it's like a Python, for example. No, sorry, it's like a Webpack. They are more like a companies, you can think. So yeah, like one person takes all, and more very centralized. Then you have federation, there would get Python is there. You often hear about benevolent dictators, which are core maintainers that they centralize the decisions, such as Linux, for example. And clubs are the most stereotyped type when you think about open source, and all these nerdy people getting together, they speak their own language, but they're kind of a tight family. It's super good, and you have as much users as contributor, because they're often very active users. They're more like the clubs. That it's nice too. Yeah. So today it is impossible to think about software, as we just said, without using open source. Without open source, the software industry breaks. This is a fact. And it's more than fair that the old model of consuming this and producing open source also changes. And dedicated developers can dedicate their precious time being fairly compensated for that. And open source has become this billionaire business model. It's not just about this moral and ethics part. I do like to think that this model is reinventing the way business communicate, create value, and compete as a reflection on this sad history of we have as humanity. There's a cost to a society and to the planet and this new model can enable a bottom-up, horizontal, holistic, and humanized economy approach. Is this actually true? As we saw before, no. History is there to prove that in the name of this philosophy, lots of misogyny, oppression, and really unethical things has happened. But the model is there, and it is up to us what to do with that. And one way to hold companies accountable is actually having open source program office. Let's say that it's not only the only way, for the, yeah, for consciously contributing back. But also because there's a lot of cases where if you have an open source project, you did someone and this someone decided not to have it anymore, you can actually break companies. You can break internet, you can break many things. So it's like, oh, we need to take care of that. It's actually more a survival question, but let's keep positive and think this is also a way to contribute back. So what the heck is that? What is an open source office? By definition, it is this department where the open source projects are supported, nurtured, and maybe born in the company. And why? Why would I want to do that? Well, because company needs to have a healthy relationship with the thing. They need this thing. And this is still not natural for most companies. Open source program office are needed to for the company to understand open source ecosystem, which is this crazy wild thing, and manage and keep this relationship healthy and sustainable. And it's kind of weird and too conceptual, but I like this image a lot, where you think you consume a lot. So if you make a list, how much open source do you consume and how you manage this and how will you contribute back and release more products. I hope this image makes a little bit more sense. Understanding this ecosystem is also like a paying attention to things that we usually do not when we take it for granted, just like this very complex license niche max we saw a little bit. And what to do? How can I do that? What are the challenges? How to measure this crazy thing? Well, there are some guidelines available, especially from To-Do Group or Linux Foundation, that help you set up your goals and metrics. And metrics are hard and they're not quite as quantitative as sales metrics. I have this kind of hard metrics, and there is so much time needed for like a community engagement, for example, which you cannot measure. It is very challenging, but mostly because as any collaborative work depends on others, and humans are humans. But come on, we're talking about open source. Remember, all for one, there's a lot of resources available. And one of them, it's called Chaos metrics. And Chaos is, they have developed those metrics in practice and software for making open source projects health and more understandable, to improve transparency and making actionable things so that relevant stakeholders, the one to make the decision, can, oh yeah, this is really cool, and can make more informed decisions also. So do you remember those unsustainable numbers that we put like in super pink? Those are some of the issues those metrics try to tackle, like how to help open source contributors to know they should place their effort in which project and how they are making an impact in the project. How to help communities to attract new members and to ensure this consistent quality, so people like me don't just go consume and go away. Sorry, open source projects. And how to make more valuable, how those members that contribute, they feel they are rewarded, they understand the importance. Also to help companies to know which communities they need to engage with and communicate the impact that this organization has back to the community, maybe evaluate the work their employers with open source, because it is an important part when you actually say, help the open source, and you have your working time for that. Evaluating the impact of your work, promote communities, and yeah, it is a lot of work, either outsourcing and inner sourcing. And I hope Diego is still around and he can detail a little bit more, especially about the inner sourcing, which we didn't get into this part yet. And do you still have time? Oh, cool. We're so good on time. This is my lovely team. These nice fellows are the ones who found the department. And thank you a lot. Those are a little references I told you for you to dig deeper. And cool, I'm here for questions, screens, Even if you're hungry, just I'm hungry, I'm leaving. Yeah, cool.
Thank you so much, Paloma. This was absolutely brilliant. Really, really amazing and insightful talk. Yeah, we definitely do have 6 minutes for questions. So please do fire away. And also, would just like to say that, yeah, as Paloma already mentioned, we also have some guests from Source Labs who are here too. I think, not sure if they're also answering questions, but yeah, it's really nice to have you all.
I saw Digin here. If you want to make some comment, I skipped Digin. Yeah, sorry, it was too much, and I miscalculated. I thought it was like ahead of time. No, I'm sorry, I eated the question time. And I know it is too much to process. It is a lot of information, and but yeah, you can always get in touch with our peeps, and we will help you. As I understood from Jason, from Jacob, you may have interesting to have if not an open source program office, at least some guidelines how to deal with open source. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I think what you just said, I think we've been discussing how we can get started open sourcing some of our like little libraries or tools that we have. I think mostly at the moment it's forks that we have in our repo open, and there's a few little things. And I think, yeah, if you have something to share maybe afterwards about how you could, like how to approach this, what are the first steps to like really low touch, because I think the big, I mean, licensing is one question, maybe that's not such a big issue, but then more like everything else that you mentioned, how do you manage that this doesn't suddenly become like a big thing that nobody planned for? Like what are like easy things, first things where can you put something out and kind of make clear that it's just out there for people to have a look at and maybe use, but we're not yet invested in spending a lot of time on that. So I'm not clear how this can be done. I think, how can you maybe try out the waters? Maybe nobody pays attention and you don't have that challenge, but who knows?
Digin, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, hi everyone. So I don't know, do you want to go for it, or I can give my point of view if you feel like. Right. So what we have done at Sauce Labs. So I don't know how many of you know this e-commerce website Zalando, and basically we took most of their documentation, which is licensed at MIT, and there is like a step-by-step guide of how you can get started. So opensource.sourcelabs.com/docs, and one of the main questions is like, if you are contributing something, is under your name or under the company's name. And in many cases, I think that's the major block for many people, because this is code you're maintaining for work, but you would like to give it back. And there has to be a small conversation with the legal department saying, hey, I want to contribute this back, but this is under Ecosia's name, for example. And then it's mostly a matter of following the guidelines of the repository you want to contribute back. And in the end, the final result or the final benefit is that you don't need to maintain your own fork. Because when you want to upgrade to the new version of the whatever component you're using, then you will need to clone it and then apply your fix. And this is more maintenance, more time during your sprint, more testing, etc., etc. But I think most of the valuable information could be seen at opensource.sourcelabs.com/docs.
Yeah, I think I wasn't that precise with my question. I think contributing to something that's already out there, I feel that's not so much of a problem, because then the project is maintained by someone else, right? And we're already doing that in some areas. And we've signed contributors agreements for people to work under if it's necessary. Just think about open source that we publish as a company, where you have probably people coming in wanting to contribute or have questions, and you might have that overhead that Paloma talked about. And I think we don't have much experience with that, but that's like one of the biggest questions for me. So how to manage that?
Right. Yeah. There is also in that link, there is a section that talks about how to do open source, and one of the learnings I've gotten in Sauce Labs and also in the previous companies that you should have like some lightweight guidelines on to decide what to open source and what to not open source, because I've seen companies that take their GitHub organizations as like a green field, so they push all the code they have, but the return of investment is very low, because one of the side effects of having open source GitHub organizations is that people who want to work with you could check them and they could see, oh, this is an interesting company because they also do open source. They allow people to contribute. But if you have a super messy GitHub organization, like nobody wants to get into that mess. So that could be like a mirror of what you're having internally. That's why if you check those docs that we have, there's like a simple 4 steps that says, okay, if you want to open source something, this should be a conversation between you and your team and your manager, because open sourcing something is not a one single person effort. And then you have to say, does this add value to the community? Yes or no? And like 3 or 4 questions that you go over that. And when you have like those check marks, usually it's a starting point. So I think it's just to get the first 2, 3 projects open sourced, and start small, like small and firm steps, and then you can keep moving. Because open sourcing is not pushing the code only, it's also about what Paloma is doing here, doing talks, documentation, helping users get started. And I think in the end, it looks good for an engineering department to open source some of their stuff. It's a really good tool for recruitment as well.
I want to add that it also makes it a lot of easier for when you want to hire someone and they already contributed to the project, their onboarding, the code base can be way easier. So for the company, it's quite interesting when you think about that, and you think, oh, if our project staff is already contributing, then they are super cool and reliable contributor. That can be super helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you very much. I was just quickly wondering, what's the kind of your day-to-day work in this open source program office, and what are the different roles you have in the team? Yeah, I know we're running over, but if people don't mind, we could go for a few minutes longer. I think it's really interesting. Yeah, just what does it generally look like in the office?
Crazy thing. I'm searching for a mind map here that I done, trying to actually understand. Oh, here, let me open and share with you a few of the things. Screen, this thing. So it's super weird, but we had like all of these actions. We contribute for our core products. Diego is mainly responsible for Selenium and Christian for WebDrive.io. They have crazy tons of conference speaking time. Diego organized the continuous testing meetup bi-weekly, at least, right? They write a lot of blog posts to help engineers to put their voice and share their knowledge. There's a lot of projects we create around it. So I kind of separate the work about maintenance and communication, and thinking about also innovation. So this is just for you to have a quick look. But there's this part, right? There's the code, and those are the main products, and they directly really contribute back to the community and to the reliability of this code. There's also this community engagement, which is super important, which has the inner community and the outside community, and lots of projects that come with which, and we're always keeping like oh, is this project maybe open sourceable? It's more interesting for us, instead of using inside of here, we created here, maybe open sourced. What else, Diggin?
I think it's a balance of many things, because personally, I thought when we were going to start the open source team, the open source program office, it was that we were going to sit and like push code to GitHub every day, but it's much more than that. We like in a company like Sauce Labs or like Ecosia, that the foundations are open source. We need to make sure that projects that we depend on are working well. Otherwise, the company won't work well. So this is also like paying attention to all the projects that are out there, what changes are happening, and then when you see, oh, like this project is going to get this new feature, and then you just have to communicate that to the product and say, this is something that is changing in this open source project that we use as a base. This could be a feature for our customers as well. So that communication that has to flow between open source, the open source ecosystem, and the product, like we are trying to set that bridge, because otherwise a competitor could see that first, and then they could claim that we were like pioneers or whatever. So that's one of the key aspects of the open source program office, to have a fluent communication, and also there are product ideas that make sense to be implemented as part of an open source project. So then this is a way to give back to the community, not only by coding, but also by offering features that are helpful to users of the program, of the open source project. And also there are like, when you are spending time in open source, then you can start to connect dots in your head and thinking like, all right, so these are ideas that I could put together to create a new proposal or a new project. So it's a bit of, when you're in the role, you start to get ideas from different places and to build up new possible projects. But I would say, as like to wrap up, I think communicating both worlds of a company, the internal product and the open source community, is one of the key factors of the open source program office. Yeah.
That's super interesting. Thank you. And it's just amazing to see that you're kind of really aware of the value of open source, and to the point that you really have dedicated specifically resources to this, the communication, the linking of those two worlds. It's brilliant. Thank you. Right. Well, unless there are some more questions, I don't know, please let me know if there are, but if there are not, then maybe we could wrap up. Thank you so much, Diego, and thank you so much, Paloma, for doing the talk, which was really wonderful and insightful, and yeah, really enjoyed it. This was honestly exactly the kind of stuff that we wanted to learn about for this offsite, and it was just extremely valuable. So thank you so much.
Thank you all, and well, we're open. Let us know if you need anything.
Will do. It's worth mentioning, by the way, that Paloma was one of the participants in Ecosia Summer of Code. Yeah, so it's also amazing to see a graduate of this program now giving us a talk and inspiring us. So thank you.
Cool. So I will let you everyone feed your bellies, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paloma.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.